So the topic for today is a very fun one. It's actually what got me into holistic coaching. Like I was saying, today's topic is one that actually got me into this whole holistic approach to coaching, to counseling, which is yoga. That pretty much my whole journey of holistic practices, of holistic approaches started with yoga. I am a yoga teacher. I'm actually a yoga teacher. I did my 200 yoga teacher training back in 2019, and I absolutely loved it. It made me fall in love even more with the practice, with yoga, with the philosophy. It was just life-changing experience. Honestly, it's hands down one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. I'm thinking of actually retaking it with my teacher, and we're seeing how we can do that because she's in America, of course, and she's going to see like, oh, what weeks do you want to pop in and maybe do a Zoom and everything. But the time zone is kind of crazy, so hopefully we'll figure it out. As I was saying, this whole journey of holistic approaches, of holistic practice, of holistic living pretty much, and how I approach coaching like that. What really got me into holistic coaching was yoga. Like I said, back in 2019, I did my 200-hour yoga teacher training, and it was life-changing. Before that, I was doing yoga for consistently, I would say for about 3 or 4 years, but inconsistently, which I guess it counts for about 7 years before 2019, before I embarked it. So I've been practicing yoga for quite a long time, but I didn't dive deep into the practice in itself. When I was back in college, I moved on my own to college, away from my parents. It was my first time and everything. It was a bit of a shock for me, to be quite honest, moving to college. That was very impactful, as I was going to do my bachelor's in psychology, but because I was by myself, even though I had my sister nearby, like on a day-to-day basis, it was very hard for me to adapt to one, living by myself, and also to try to make friends. And so I kind of developed a little bit of anxiety and some depression during that season because I was just not adapting very well with college life and living on my own. It was very, very, very hard. And so I started to dive deeper into the practice of yoga. I started to go into yoga classes, which I've never done before until that point, basically. I was doing self practices and videos on YouTube or buying a DVD, of yoga and just practicing at home and whatnot. And so for the first time in my university, they offered yoga classes, group yoga classes. And so I decided to go in. They were for free because I was a student. And I experienced something that I had never experienced before, which is that sense of community and being able to be in a room of people that thought the same way that I did, or maybe we're going through similar things as I was, and we're going for the purpose, not of only moving their body, but with a deeper purpose of maybe helping themselves transcend something or liberate themselves or release something, right? Obviously, back then, I didn't go with that purpose. Oh, I'm going to do yoga to release this. It just happened naturally as soon as I started going. And so I went to my yoga practices, to those yoga classes, and I started to learn, thankfully, through my teacher, that instructor that I had inside of those classes. I started to learn a little bit more about the philosophy behind yoga, which I didn't have before. I was just doing it to maintain my flexibility because I was a dancer back in Venezuela for about 9 years. And so when I moved to the States, that was really hard to keep up because dance classes were extremely expensive for my parents at that point in comparison to Venezuela. And I also didn't like those dance studios that much. But besides that point, I never really learned what yoga was. I was utilizing it which I think most people do, is I was going in head first because I wanted to continue my flexibility or improve my flexibility, right? And soon after I started going to those classes, and because of that teacher, I started to learn that it was so much more than the practice of moving and becoming flexible. I realized that it was not at all about that. I was trying to be kind of like, oh, I want to show off because I'm very flexible type of person. And then soon after, I started to realize, yeah, but what's the point of showing off my flexibility? What am I trying to gain from that? And I started to reflect upon that. And then I started to humble myself down and realizing that the practice was allowing me to go much more deeper within myself. And that is when I realized that yoga was completely different from what I thought it was, which I thought it was just about flexibility, right? About being flexible. That's really what I thought yoga was. And doing handstands and doing all those fun things, which, yeah, you can incorporate them, but it's not about that. So I'm very excited about talking about how to integrate yoga inside of coaching and how I've done it, because through my own personal practice, through doing it on my own, then doing group classes, then continuing to foster my own practice on my day-to-day, and then doing my yoga teacher training, especially when I did my yoga teacher training, it just kind of made sense how to add this into everything. And I realized this when I was going to my yoga classes back in college and doing my bachelor's in psychology, that a lot of things were coming in together. I was making a lot of connections that to be quite honest, I thought that I was the first one to discover that yoga and psychology and counseling or psychiatry, like within that realm, fit together. I thought I was the first one to guess it. And then I realized a couple of years later that it wasn't. But I thought that I started to see that connection because they were going so hand in hand. Everything that I was learning in my social psychology class, in my cognitive psychology class, like all of these things that I was learning in my psychology courses, I was integrating and learning through my own yoga practice while I was going to those classes. And ultimately, it helped in ease the anxiety that I was experiencing and the depression that I was experiencing. And it fostered this sense of purpose in me, of calmness, of being able to as well control the anger that I was feeling within myself, because the depression that I was experiencing was manifesting as anger. And I was suffering with some anger management issues, to be quite honest, at that point. And that began to ease it quite a lot. And alongside that, I started to gain some muscle strength on my arms because I have terrible muscle strength on my upper body strength. I really do. But it really began to nurture that part of me. And it made me feel both strong externally and physically and internally. And that's how my journey of how integrating yoga, at first, of course, with psychology, how it started to make sense to me and how I wanted to do this pretty much forever for the rest of my life. This is how my journey started with integrating these holistic practices, specifically yoga. So it all started with yoga. And once I graduated and everything, I did my I signed up for my master's in counseling. And now I signed up for doing the accreditation inside of the coaching masters and doing that and being certified as a coach. And so once certified, I just knew that, okay, I need to add yoga inside of coaching because they just go hand in hand. For a lot of people that were in my cohort, and even for Lewis, they were kind of like, it doesn't really make sense how you can unify yoga inside of coaching. And then I was like, it does make sense to me. It just makes so much sense. And so I'm going to explain to you how it makes sense and how you can start to integrate yoga inside of your coaching sessions, inside of your coaching practice, because it's not necessarily that you have to be a yoga teacher in order to add yoga inside of your coaching business, of your coaching practice, of your coaching sessions. You don't have to be a yoga teacher to do it. You just need some knowledge of, obviously, of the practice, of you doing it yourself, of embodying the practice, because how can you teach or give something to someone when you haven't tried it yourself, correct? So you just require for you to have been to yoga classes and kind of maybe read upon yoga as well. Or maybe just by listening to this podcast, you'll be able to be like, okay, I can learn more about this, or this is sufficient. This is sufficient knowledge for me to go ahead and start to add it into my coaching business, right? So before we dive into how to add it and how does it make sense, first, let's answer the question of what is yoga, right? Most of us are going to think that yoga is just about body movement and being flexible and becoming flexible and doing these hard poses that most people can't do, and is the opposite of that. Yoga actually, in the word in Sanskrit, which is the original language that yoga comes from, yoga literally means to yoke. It means union, to bind, to join, to harness. That's what yoga means. So let that sink in for a little bit. Yoga means union. That's the best word that I can use for yoga. Now, what does union mean to you? For me, is connectedness, really being able to connect every single part of me, the physical part, the mental part, the spiritual part, my soul, and my emotions, everything. At the most basic level, at least in my understanding when I first started, it was my mental, spiritual, and physical bodies and being able to unify all of those things together, being able to come into one union, right? And so the practice of yoga really is a mental practice. Some people, some yoga teachers, some yoga practitioners call yoga as the science of the mind, because where there are the benefits of the asana, which is the physical practice, that practice, the physical one, it's relatively new in itself. It all goes back to the mind, what your mind can do, and that focus and concentration and discipline that you have in your day-to-day life. So really, it is a mental practice to pretty much achieve greater consciousness, to create greater connection within yourself and with others as well, through the practice of meditation and physical postures, which is what we call asanas in yoga, which is what we know as yoga as. And so, like I said, yoga is truly just the science of the mind, the practice of awareness, of self-reflection, of self-awareness, of going deep within without having to really express yourself in words. You're expressing yourself in a different way, which is through body movement. And so when we mostly think of yoga, we mostly think of the asana practice, which is, again, the postures, the movement. But that is only one small portion and one small part of the practice of yoga. And maybe some of you are yoga teachers and you know this concept and you understand it. And you're trying to understand as well, how can I, as my knowledge as a yoga teacher, whether it's Ashtanga or Hatha Yogi or Vinyasa Yoga, whatever type of yoga teacher you are, and you want to incorporate this inside of your yoga practice, inside of your coaching business, you're like, how the heck does this make sense? And trust me, it does. It really, really, really does, because everything just comes back together. And so yoga, what it really, truly is doing is that it will help the person that is doing it foster relaxation, strength, not only physical, but also mental strength, as well as flexibility, not only physical flexibility, but mental flexibility, because it allows you to understand deeper more of other people. And also experiential presence. What does that mean? Essential experiential presence is truly being present in the here and now. Kind of like if you're listening to this podcast, if you're here inside of Coaching Mastery and watching this live right now, you're present here right now because you're paying attention, you're listening. Your mind is at focus of what you're listening, of what you're watching maybe. And so this is truly the practice of mindfulness, is being in the present and being here in the now. And that's what yoga fosters throughout the practice. And so that's what we also want to foster through our coaching sessions. Inside of our coaching business, we want to help our clients to be more present within themselves, with themselves, at their own body, being present with everything that they're feeling so they can attune to their own needs, and also being present with others, with whatever it is that they're doing, with their jobs, with their significant others, with their families, with their kids, being present, being in the here and now rather than to focus too much on the past or too much on the future, right? We want them to be here and now. And when we're doing our coaching sessions, it is so important that they are there, that there are no distractions, because when there are distractions, the change and the transformations and the breakthroughs and that the whole component of a coaching session is, it kind of goes out the window because they're not really paying attention to what they're reflecting or what they're saying. And that is so important. And so with yoga, you foster that mindfulness, that presence through the physical practice, but also through understanding the philosophy behind it, understand what yoga truly means. And so when we know of yoga, when we say yoga, like I said before, we think about the movement practice of the asana, right? Which is the movement, the postures. But there's also another component. There are actually 8 components. It's called the 8 limbs of yoga, but I'm not going to go over in detail in here right now, but I'm going to go say 3. There's one that is prana, which is basically your breath. Breath is so important because it allows you to connect deep within. And that's also a practice within yoga. And you also have meditation and mindfulness. Again, becoming present and doing the practice of controlling your thoughts and observing them and being able to be with yourself and your environment. So why integrate yoga into coaching? You may be wondering why would I want to do this? Or how does it make sense? Make it make sense, please. Make it make sense. So really, when we come to the understanding of coaching, right, in the psychology field and everything, which coaching is kind of part of the psychology field, that's what I believe in, at least. And so when we think about the Western psychological theories or coaching in this case, right, the whole purpose of it is that our troubles really stem from our life experiences, from our genetics, from our cognitive thoughts. So our cognitive patterns, so our thoughts, our thought patterns, our habits, our behavioral habits as well, stress, all of these things is what pretty much our troubles stem from. So, which is completely valid and it's completely accurate, I believe. But yoga, however, thinks about it in a different perspective. And what it does, it says that our difficulties, our troubles stem or are rooted in separation and disconnect. So separation from what? What does that mean? Disconnect from what? So really pretty much what that means is disconnect from oneself, separation from oneself and from what's truly important in our lives. That's why knowing how you probably know this, or if you're going into coaching, that's why values are so important inside of a coaching session, because the connectedness to that, what's important to us, is important to be connected to those things. So when we have separation, which causes basically dissatisfaction and suffering, yoga teaches is that separation that causes dissatisfaction and suffering, which is basically the root cause of our troubles, the root cause of our problems, right? Suffering and dissatisfaction of our lives. If you really think about it in the coaching terms, it's just when someone needs coaching is because they're dissatisfied with something that is happening in their lives. Or maybe they're just suffering through something that happened to them, or because they just can't get to some point or to their goal or whatever it is. And so that is what causes, that's the root cause of it. And so another thing that is also rooted that yoga teaches that causes our problems is ignorance of our true nature. So now being able to tap into our own power, into our true wisdom that we have within ourselves, and our false identification with what we experience as well, which is what we call the ego, right? So that sense of I am this, I am that, and labeling things as that instead of really seeing who you truly are. And this is what we're trying to do inside of coaching. We're trying to help our clients really discover who they truly are, or not really discover, because it's deep within us. They just need a little help for us to tap into that. They need to tap into their own self so they can unleash that, right? And so that's what the difference, and that's what yoga is so important, I think, into, and that's why I like to integrate it inside of coaching. That's what yoga, like I said before, is what truly made me see all of these holistic practices that I teach, that I talked about in that what is holistic coaching, all of these modalities that I do and that I have practice on with my clients, because it started all with yoga. Because when you really think about it, yoga is really all about the connection between mind, body, and soul and spirit and emotions in that way. And so it is that integration that we're trying to seek by creating a more holistic process through mindfulness, and to improve our clients' connectedness with themselves and with the world around them, right? And create more awareness within themselves, more self-awareness, because it's so important. And so yoga, what it brings into this picture is that connectedness and awareness through their own internal experience, because that internal experience, which is their thoughts, their emotions, their patterns, all of these things, they're reflected on the outside world. And so another thing as to why add yoga into your coaching business is because it fosters experiential presence, which is, again, what I said, is that being able to be in the here and now. As I am here right now talking to you, I am here and now. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do tomorrow. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do next week for my birthday or something like that. I'm just here right now, trying to deliver and do my best to deliver the best information that I can, helping it make sense to you. And this is me being in the here and now, being mindful of what I'm doing, being intentional with what I'm doing. And so you're trying to foster that through your clients, through yoga, with your clients through yoga. That's what I meant. Another component of it, because yoga, a big component of it is the physical practice, is that it allows your clients to focus on bodily cues, right? Our emotions are reflected in our bodies. Easily, we can see this within our client sessions when maybe our client has their arms crossed. That's a verbal cue. Maybe they're suppressing, maybe they're being guarded about something, or maybe they're upset about something, or maybe they're annoyed about the session, whatever it is. When we use yoga instead of coaching, you're able to teach your clients to go into their bodies. And what that means is being able to recognize those bodily cues, what they're doing, how the emotions are expressing inside of their bodies, right? And learning how to listen to their own body, to their own needs. So maybe a heart race, it can be shown as fear, or it can be shown as manifested as, or no, what I'm trying to say. So maybe the fear that they're experiencing is manifesting as a heart race, right? Maybe the anxiety because they have a presentation tomorrow is experiencing as a heart rate. And they're like, oh, but I'm so anxious. I feel like I have anxiety all the time. I thought that I had anxiety for the longest time. And it was because I was drinking coffee. Right. And so I wasn't listening to my body of what I was putting inside of my body, because I thought that I was just like, oh, I don't know why I'm feeling so anxious. My heart is racing. I thought that I had like tachycardia or something. I don't even know if I said that right. I thought I had like a medical something, because it was so persistent, that heart race and everything. And then I realized that I was just having anxiety. Right. And so learning how to listen to our bodies is so important. And so yoga allows you to teach your clients and for your clients to know how to respond to their body cues, right? It also helps foster self-efficacy, right? Through the body movement in itself, and empowerment of our own body. When we're able to move in a way that we can express ourselves, that we can release, specifically through yoga in this case, you feel more empowered and controlled about your body, because you are in control of what you're doing. It's also a really great way of integrating with those clients that have kind of like more difficulty expressing themselves verbally, with just talking and sharing their emotions. when you use body movement, you don't need to use verbal language in order to express yourself. Now, can be uncomfortable, but when you do certain exercises and certain poses, which I'm going to tell you about at the end, don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging. It's like, what do I do in a coaching session? How can I put yoga inside a session? I'll let you know. Don't worry. So basically what it will do is, instead of them having to express themselves because they can't find the words, so they just don't know how to, or they're scared to, they don't feel like, they feel, they're in that shell of vulnerability. Maybe they don't want to express it. Yoga is a really great way to help them tap into it and express it through their bodies. And therefore, maybe then allowing them to speak about it, to express it, because they're expressing it in a different form first that is not through talk therapy, right? And so when we also do this, and if you really think about it, why does this happen? Why is body movement so great when a client of yours is not being able to express themselves verbally? Like, how does that even work? When we really think about it, the emotions are embodied in our physical experience. And we learned through this, especially the best example that we can get through this, so that way you understand a little bit better, is through the fight or flight response, right? When we see a stimulus, let's put it in perspective, a bear, even though we barely see those nowadays in our day to day. But let's put it into like extreme case. There's a bear. I'm in the woods. There's a bear right in front of me. My immediate response is to flight. So, but what is happening? Why is my immediate response to flight? Okay, it's because there are those different ways of responding to a stressful or scary or dangerous situation. But what is happening internally is very, very different. And you're not even aware of it, because the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system is all responsible for it, right? Your nervous system is responsible for it. And basically what is happening is that your mind, your brain, your eyes first is seeing the bear, which sends signal to your brain, to your amygdala, which sends the response of, oh, this is fear, which sends the neurotransmitters to pump up adrenaline, right? The hormone of adrenaline to your kidneys, or to your, I think it is kidneys, right? Yeah. I think I'm confusing anatomy here right now, but this is kind of like the flow that it goes, and it's all happening internally. And the way that the fear is being manifested is with you getting sweaty, your pupils dilating. But the first input is the emotion. And the emotion is then being carried out throughout your whole body in order to allow you to respond in an efficient way through a dangerous situation. So this is what is happening internally. And when we're in a client session, and why is movement so good when they can't express themselves? It's because of that, because maybe they are experiencing an emotion. Maybe they're too scared to speak out. Maybe they don't know how to do it. But the emotion is there, trapped inside of their bodies. And when they're able to access that and let it flow through their own body, then they're able to talk about it even more. Hopefully that's making a lot of sense in that aspect of why it is like that. And so really what we're bringing in yoga and all of these and yoga into coaching is, especially for those that really have a deep understanding, like yoga teachers specifically, because they're confused as to how the heck to integrate all their knowledge inside of their coaching. And the whole basis of it is everything that we learned talking as a yoga teacher here, that we learned in our philosophy, the philosophical part of yoga, of what it is. All those principles, the yamas and the niyamas, which is the universal moralities and our own personal observances. That's why when we learn all these things, we don't need to teach them in a sense of like, this is what it is, and and this is what happens when you do this and that. It's more of like, how can you transmit that message for your client to understand it? And it's kind of like being careful with oneself, helping your client be more self-acceptant, be more compassionate with themselves, allowing and helping your client really listening to your bodies, allowing your client to live their truth and show them that what they're doing, maybe it's not really in alignment with their own values, right? So maybe they're lying to their significant other because they're scared that, that, I don't know, that the presentation, that they got a job promotion, for example. That's the example of a client, right? That's coming to you, and they're lying to their spouse because they don't want to make more money than them. And so that's an example. And so when you understand your clients' values and your client values honesty, right? That doesn't fall into alignment. And when you're able to reflect that upon your client, then they are able to go, then maybe this is why I'm feeling so stressed lately, and this is why I'm feeling so anxious lately, right? There's always, like we know with coaching, and that there's always a deeper cause of things and why we're behaving the way that we're behaving and thinking the way that we're behaving and thinking the way that we're thinking. And so yoga also foster this. And this is for my yoga teachers out there that are considering that don't know how to add yoga inside of their coaching business, or that want to do coaching, but they don't know how to make it sense, right? It's so easy when you stop overcomplicating it, because it's so much simpler than it is. And so for those not yoga teachers, which is, you can still add this inside of your tool belt as a coach inside of your sessions. Really what it is to, for example, in a session, you're fostering or you're helping your client is create awareness and introspection, right? In a regular coaching session, that's what you're helping your clients do. And so in a coaching session, introspection and self-awareness is really through reflection, through verbal identification, and exploring one's feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. Basically asking, what are you feeling? What makes you think that? What, all those questions, right? And with yoga, especially if you're a teacher and you teach yoga already in itself, but doing it in a session is to really pretty much enhance their awareness through different practices, through different philosophies. Like, you can, even not yoga teachers, everybody can just go and learn about yoga philosophy and learn about pretty much the Yoga Sutras and the 8 limbs of yoga and what yoga is all about and the philosophical part of it. And then use that information to integrate it into your coaching sessions, because it's not about what can you do with it, but how can you transmit the message so they can get it, right? And education is a very big component, I think, that allows your client for more introspection and more self-awareness. While adding yoga inside of coaching, you can foster, again, awareness, introspection, behavioral change, cognitive change, and self-acceptance. I keep using cognitive change because this is my psychology, scientific nerd person coming out. Cognitive change, what it means is just thought change, changing your thoughts, basically. So it's helping people think differently. That's really what it means. And you're doing this through your coaching sessions, right? You're helping them think differently, to analyze what is it that they're saying versus what they're showing to you, or what they're saying versus, or what they're showing versus what they're saying, and stuff like that. And so emotional impact of one's it affects our thinking, right? Our thinking affects our emotions. And so basically what we're doing is, as a coach, we're helping them think differently. We're helping them create this everlasting change in their lives. And you can do this as well by adding yoga, through creating this environment where the client in front of you can compassionately and non-judgmentally observe their thoughts and behaviors. So with coaching, what we're trying to do is always pretty much, how can you change this thought? How can you change that? Da, 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 da. And it's always going through the next, instead of alongside it, because you don't want to do one instead of. It's this and that. It's not this or that. Is to use both. And the whole component of yoga is to foster this compassion within yourself, right? Being non-judgmental of your thoughts, being non-judgmental of your behaviors, and fostering that and nurturing compassion for yourself. And this is what you want to do for your clients, alongside helping them think differently and challenge their thoughts and challenge what they're saying and their behaviors and their habits. You also want to integrate, which is a very big principle inside of yoga, is to help them be compassionate with themselves, to be non-judgmental. And when you are able to create this environment, you yourself as a coach for them, providing a non-judgmental, unconditional regard within your session, then they're able to do that for themselves. And they can do this very easily by observing their thoughts and observing their behaviors. And this is more of like, okay, helping your clients step back from the seat of like answering questions and just, okay, hold on one second. You just said this. Go look at what you just said, hear what you just said, and allowing them to go deep into that without necessarily having to ask you why you said this or what makes you think that or anything like that. It's just to observe what they just said. And that component, the fact and the activity of just the action, this is the word that I'm looking for, the action of just helping them observe what they just said can be so powerful and can be a lot more insightful than asking them a regular question of challenging that question, right? Because maybe you are challenging that question of why are you saying that? But instead of doing that, you're challenging it in a more compassionate way, in a more non-judgmental way, but through the power of observation, through helping them. Yeah, I want you to go back to that. What do you see when you say that? What do you hear when you heard yourself saying that? What does that mean to you, right? So it's kind of like allowing them to go back, to step back from being challenged, from answering questions, to reflect a lot deeper for themselves as to what they just said. And this fosters mindfulness, being intentional about their thoughts, about their behaviors, and being able to kind of realize why they're doing what they're doing. And again, foster that mindfulness and being more present in the here and now, because sometimes, which everybody struggles with, including me, we say things and then we don't mean them the next time, or we say things and we forget that we said those things. And so when you're able to deeply reflect that upon with your clients, they're able to go deeper, a lot more deeper. So this is a great way of doing it, because it's a less forceful way of promoting and creating change into your clients' life. It's less forceful because they're diving deep themselves and observing that. They're distancing themselves and they're being able to see their thoughts and the patterns and whatever it is that they're trying to see at that point. And so it also supports that self-acceptance of it, because maybe they're able to analyze it and be like, yeah, I was saying that because this, and that. And maybe there are excuses and you can challenge that. But at the same time, then maybe they're creating that validation and you're also creating that validation, and you're also being able to see their thought process behind it before challenging it further. Hopefully that makes sense. So again, you're helping them learn to be present, because there's this assumption in the yoga world, or for yogis, that we are different from our thoughts. And we learn this through coaching, through our certifications, and through becoming a coach, is that we are so different from our thoughts. Our thoughts don't define us. And so when you are able to as well give that to your clients and express that to them, and they're able to internalize it themselves, that their thoughts are not themselves, that do not define them, then by observing, one is able to disidentify from them, disassociate from them, just being able to see it like that. And when they're able to see it like that, they're able to reflect a lot more and being able to see it from different perspectives, right? Instead of just seeing from their own perspective. Like a great example of this is, I used to, before diving deeper into my own self-development and everything and doing coaching and all of this stuff, I would label as like, when I was having anxiety, it's like, oh, my anxiety is flaring up today, or this, my anxiety, blah, blah, blah. I was labeling it as my anxiety. And through my yoga teacher trainings and through diving deeper into coaching, which is a very big thing, again, in yoga, is that you want to dissociate from your thoughts. You're different from your thoughts. And putting that label already on myself, that my anxiety, because it's mine, I don't want it to be mine, right? Because I want to transcend it. I want to remove it. I want to release it. And so I shift the verbal cue of it. Instead of saying my anxiety every time I have anxiety, I would say the anxiety that I experience, or this anxiety, or instead of, yeah, I have anxiety, it would be like, I have this anxiety or whatever. It's like, I was just rephrasing it a different way. And for some reason, it's not coming into my mind right now, the other phrase that I was using. But essentially, it was, instead of labeling my anxiety, I was like, I have this anxiety, or the anxiety that I was experiencing, or this anxious feeling is coming up for me. Disassociating, observing it allowed me to move on from my anxious thoughts. Again, I said it, my anxious thoughts, but from the anxious thoughts that I was having. It's quite normal to say it, but when you're able to observe, again, foster that mindfulness within your sessions for your clients, and you're able to mirror that back to them, then they're able to catch themselves with it, right? And then therefore change for the better. Another thing as well that adds into why coaching and yoga makes sense, it's because it fosters this connectedness, right? When you're a coach, you're connecting to another human being. You are fostering a coach and client relationship where you are there for them. They are feeling like they're not judged by you and whatnot. And through yoga as well, you continue to foster that, but in a deeper way, because you're helping them connect with themselves through mind, body, soul, and emotions, right? You're helping them listen to their bodies, tap into them, listen to the wisdom that they have within them, because there's nothing more powerful than our own inner wisdom, than our own inner power. There's nothing more powerful than that, our intuition and all of those things. And so when you are able to help your clients tap into that, they're able to be more resilient, more self-acceptant of themselves, more kind. It creates and supports strength and empowerment within themselves, right? And so let's put this all together as to how yoga makes sense even more inside of coaching. And that is because yoga has some certain principles, which I have already talked about, but let me name them so that way it makes sense to you. And maybe you can transmit that through your sessions and with your clients. And it's like, basically, one of them is that, there is wisdom in experiencing, in being, in just, there is wisdom in just your own unique experience and what you experience and being here now in your body. There is wisdom in that. And when you're able to help your clients see that, just by saying, close your eyes for a second, put your one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly, take a deep breath, deep exhale out. Just try it right now. If you're obviously not driving or doing some dangerous activity or whatnot, if you're able to do this right now, just close your eyes, put one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly, and take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. How does it feel to be here right now within your body? That already is powerful. Like I said, I didn't do anything yoga related. I didn't do any movement there. I didn't tell you, do this and move this. No, I just said, tap into your body, right? How does it feel within your body when you breathe right here, right now? That's already helping them gain wisdom within their own experience with being. Or the other principle as well is that you are right just as you are. You are good enough just as you are right now. You're better than good enough, right? You probably have forgotten all of it. And all you have to do is remember and realize it, that you're right as you are. As one other principle that we try to foster through yoga. And that's what we want to foster through our coaching sessions. Then there's also, the fact of union, that we're all interrelated, that we're all connected, that the mind, body, soul, and emotions are connected, that me other people, the universe, animals, the world, we're all connected, and there are relationships within one another, even if we can't see them, and even if they're not tangible and we can't touch them, right? Another one is that change is inevitable, right? And so we're trying to foster change through coaching already, helping them change their habits, helping them change their thought patterns, helping them change the way that they regulate their emotions, right? Change is inevitable. Helping them go through a difficult experience that maybe they're just scared of change. Change is inevitable. When you're able to show that to your clients, and when they're able to practice yoga as well, because a really big component of this as well, if you're not a yoga teacher and you can't utilize body movements or do a yoga flow for your clients, you can guide them so they can do a yoga flow from many YouTube videos that are out there, right? And through that, they can foster that perspective that change is inevitable, right? Again, yoga practices can help you become more aware of your body, of your breath, of your mind, of your spirit, and your link into this world. Because again, you're tapping into your wisdom, into your own inner wisdom. You're helping them into that, right? That you are different from your thoughts. This is a big one. You are different from your thoughts. Your mind is usually filled with this continually changing thoughts, images, visions, dreams, beliefs, everything. So it is possible to observe our thoughts if you cultivate the ability to separate yourself from them. And this is one of what we want to bring into our sessions as well. Instead of saying, yeah, but why are you thinking this? Which is a valid question as well, is kind of like, okay, look at that thought. What do you see? What else do you see within that thought? Allowing them to kind of detach from that helps for them to see that the thoughts is not them. It's kind of like, I had my anxiety. When I was able to say, no, that's not mine. It's just something that I'm experiencing, something that my body experiences. I was able to detach from that and feel a lot better, right? Again, yoga brings you into the present moment. It brings peace and calmness and happiness to this moment. So when you're able to do that within your sessions, it's amazing because you're able to give that to your clients right here, right now in a session. So how is yoga most beneficial? For who is yoga most beneficial? Pretty much for anybody that is coming within your coaching sessions with any of your clients. But I think it's very, very, very beneficial for people that are experiencing anxiety, for they're experiencing depression. It's really great when a client is being guarded to you, when they're not able to express themselves, right? Through body movement, we talked about this. With individuals that have eating disorders, that have gone through trauma, with those cognitive discrepancies or thoughts and patterns. I keep saying cognitive stuff, but that's my scientific, psychological person that I am. And for people that are suffering with self-esteem, with stress, right? It helps with reducing stress and anger as well. And so how do we integrate it into a session? This is the part that you were waiting for, probably. So a really good way of doing it is, I'm going to show you or tell you about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. I think 5 of them. And that is, one is through the breath. We talked about that one of the components of yoga is prana, which is breath control, right? And so one of them is alternate nostril breathing, which is a very easy one to make. You can find this on YouTube, but pretty much you grab your thumb and your pinky. That's the ones that I use. And you grab your thumb and your pinky and you close one of your nostrils. But first, before doing that, you take a deep inhale and a deep exhale. And then you, with your thumb, you close, if you're using your right hand, you close your right nostril. And then you inhale from your left nostril for 4. And then you count to 4. You close your left nostril with your pinky. And then you exhale through your right nostril. Then you inhale through your right nostril. Then you close your right nostril. And then you exhale through your left nostril. So this is alternate nostril breathing. And you can use this within your coaching sessions with your client right in front of you. 1, to teach it to them. And 2, to help them reduce any stress, to help with their parasympathetic nervous system. So that way they can bring them back into the present moment, get them back into their body, help them calm down. And it's a really great resource for them to utilize whenever they're feeling stressed, whenever they're feeling anxious. It's even great if you are before going to bed. It's really good to help you go to sleep. So this is one way that you can utilize it in your sessions, right? And help them and create that resource for them to have whenever whenever they're not with you and they're going on their day-to-day life. Another one, which is very simple, is to help them do a seated twist, right? This calms the nervous system and it helps them breathe into the space. So if they're seated right in front of you, right, in a session, you just tell them to rotate, pretty much lift their arms up to the sky and then rotate their torso only, not their head and everything. Their neck will follow with it, with that movement of their torso. And so it's just they're moving and then they're rotating. And that seated twist already in itself will help them elongate that spine, breathe into the spine, breathe into the chest, and see how that feels in their body. And so when they're breathing in here, you just guide them to breathe into this pose, into this twist, and see how they're feeling, right? And then go to the other side, of course, because you want to create that balance between both sides. And then afterwards, ask them how did that make them feel. It's just such a simple movement. You don't have to be a yoga teacher to do that. Another one is seated cat-cow. If you've been to a yoga class, you know what that is. If not, it's very simple. If they're seated, just guide your client to put their hands on their knees and just make sure that their feet are grounded to the floor. And basically, they're on the inhale, they're expanding their chest, rounding up their spine. And this expansion is what you want to foster in here. The whole component is one, movement of the spine, but also the expansion of the chest. This is great for people that find it difficult to be vulnerable when they're guarded, when they have a strong emotion in the chest. It's a heart opener, right? Because you're expanding this area of your chest. You're expanding these muscles. You're breathing into that expansion, right? And that helps sometimes release anything or expand or help it with being more vulnerable. This is a great way if they're being guarded and they're like not showing and they're not able to express themselves. By just doing that, they're breathing into the space, right? And so that's that's cow. And then cat basically on the exhale is rounding up the spine, bringing the chin into the chest. And that's what you're doing. So you inhale, expand the chest, round up your spine. And then you exhale, round up your spine again, and put the navel in and tuck your chin in. And so that movement, doing that a couple of times for a couple of breaths and guiding your client in that will help with that. Again, it helps them move their body, move their spine, but also it helps them expand the chest and be able to maybe be more vulnerable as well. It can work for some. It may not work with others, and that's okay. If it doesn't work, that's okay. Maybe it's not for them. Then you have seated forward fold, which means is if they're seated, again, feet on the ground, and then you're just asking them to place their abdominals or their belly onto their legs. So, right, they're just folding forward. That's what they're doing. And this allows for spine extension. So breathing into that, it increases the parasympathetic nervous system. So what this means is helps them calm down, helps relax and promotes that. And a couple of breaths in that position will help them relax from whatever they're experiencing. Especially if they're telling you a story or something that is troubling them and it's causing them a lot of stress, doing this will help them be calm down, be more relaxed, and then therefore come into a more non-judgmental and more compassionate way of expressing and understanding more. Maybe if it's a conflict with someone else, maybe understanding that person's point of view or being able to be, more compassionate with them. Or if it's with them and the negative self-talk is being able to calm them down and being able to bring that more positive regard for them. And you also have mountain pose, which is basically just standing nice and tall, right? And this just creates physical grounding. If you're experiencing anxiety, this is a great way of fostering groundedness. Just being grounded in here and now, and just feet on the ground is just one of the best things to do without any shoes or any socks on. Just touching the ground just makes you feel more connected and more firm and strong. Again, fostering groundedness. So before we wrap up, a couple of things to keep in mind when you're doing this. It's always good to ask your client, the person, if they have any physical conditions that they may have, just because that way you know what to do or what not to do. If you're a yoga teacher, if you're not a yoga teacher, that's okay if you don't know what's good or not. But if, for example, if they're experiencing back troubles, it's better to help them do it lightly rather than like, no, expand your chest a lot more, right? Because you don't want that, because you don't know what that's going to cost for them. And if yoga, ask them if yoga has worked before, if they've tried it, if what has worked, what has not, what they didn't like, what they don't like, right? And so that way you're able to orient them in a better way of what the different yoga types are out there, and if you can use it with them or not, because it's really good. You don't want to use something that they hate or that they don't like, right? Hate is a really strong word, but yeah. And you can also provide education, basically what you learned here. Think about everything that you learned here. Think about what you can research online. There's so much information online about yoga philosophy, and this is what we want to foster inside of our coaching sessions, because when you're able to understand that, then you're able to transmit that to your clients. It helps. One of the biggest things as well is helping them focus on the present moment to improve emotional regulation with themselves and helping them reduce that avoidance to their uncomfortable thinking or uncomfortable emotions. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Yoga is such a great tool to utilize inside of your coaching. It doesn't necessarily have to be as a physical format. You don't have to teach them how to be, how to move or be a yoga teacher or anything. All you have to do is understand what yoga is, right? And utilize some body movements. Research is really, there's so much information out there. So hope you enjoyed this. Hope you have a beautiful day, evening, wherever you may be. Ta-ta.